It's time for No Safe Spaces. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Rich. How are you doing?
Pretty well. How are you?
Not bad. I was listening to part of the end of that. I didn't get the whole segment. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it. But I kept hearing the word diversity, which is always an interesting word because, well, that's sort of what I wanted to talk about this week. About a week ago, I know a lot of things happened over the weekend, and maybe we'll get to some of those. About a week ago, an Uzbeck Muslim driving a rented truck from Home Depot goes on a little drive and runs down dozens of people, kills 8 of them on a bike path in Manhattan. And before he's shot and wounded, he gets out of his truck and yells, Allahu Akbar, which is the story that's going to get drowned by what happened in Texas yesterday. But a few days later on Tucker Carlson Tonight, Tucker was talking to Mark Stein, and they were talking about an NBC News headlines and media headlines that were really more worried about, say, the backlash against Muslims than, the people who died, motivation for the attack. So their focus was, pretty typical. But Carlson said, in reference to this, that feeling virtuous about diversity is more important than your safety. And I thought that sums up so much of what happens from the left. This sort of virtue signaling. I mean, you could change that phrase and change it to feeling virtuous about diversity is more important than your blank. And you could cover a lot of topics. It's more important than feeling safe in a public restroom or locker room. It's more important than being a Christian small business owner. And naturally, it's more important than your right to free speech. We have college Republicans who are trying to hold meetings of their college group. It's just them. They rent a room or they use a space in a library, and these virtuous diversity people bust into their meetings and disrupt them because, in their opinion, they don't even have the right to talk peacefully amongst themselves about things they object to.
All I can hope is that it's become so out of hand that people see it for what it is.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they have. Antifa planned a November 4th day of action.
So so they was going to topple the Trump agenda.
Yeah,
topple the Trump
cities.
Presidency. There you go.
They're gonna overthrow the government, basically.
Right.
I'm not sure how they plan to do that, but they said they were going to start on Saturday, and so they had 20 cities, and they're going to overthrow Mike Pence and Donald Trump. And they took out full-page ads in newspapers, some of them costing as much as $150,000 each. They had online contact information in all these cities. They had pre-printed signs available. Very well-funded event. Some say funded by George Soros. I don't have any clue if that's true. I didn't trace the money. But the turnout was lousy, except for maybe New York and L.A. and probably Chicago. So this great big thing that they had planned for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they spent all this money on all these ads and all these signs, and it really kind of was a nothing burger. And these are the people that are behind that same messaging, that silencing speech before it even happens. The Dartmouth professor Mark Bray wrote an entire book about Antifa. He got a lot of press for saying that he advocated for this violence in advance of the speech to prevent the speech from ever occurring. So now you've got these 20 cities with all these guys that are supposed to show up. In some towns, the police presence was greater than the actual number of protesters who showed up.
Oh, you mean the police actually decided they were going to show up and do their job instead of stand down and let these thugs run amok?
Yeah, I didn't check every single city, but, even in L.A. and New York, and there was a city in Texas that had more police officers than actual protesters. Obviously L.A. and New York are pretty big, so a lot of people showed up. But some of the Antifa protesters, of course, they always show up wearing all black. They have their faces covered. They showed up. Some of them showed up with baseball bats. One really clever guy used an axe handle to hold his pre-printed sign, so it was like a sign handle. The police said, no, let you in there with that. At least one guy in Los Angeles was arrested for saying repeatedly that they needed to bloody pro-Trump counter-protesters.
Oh, there you go.
So the violence component is still there. There's still a connection between these groups going after college Republicans and these probably college students going out in the street dressed up as ninja, trying to beat people before they say anything they don't want to hear. And another thing I read said this entire thing was organized by communists, which of course kind of makes sense because Antifa is, for the last 80 years, been a communist movement. So that's not at all surprising. But again, these people are feeling virtuous about silencing speech. They're like, we have to do this. We don't care if it's peaceful. We don't care about the First Amendment. We have to make sure these people don't say anything so you don't have to hear it.
What?
Well, that's really what they're after, right? I mean, go back to Mark Bray, the professor from Dartmouth. He advocated violence, Antifa-like violence, to keep people from ever speaking in public so that other people would not hear words they didn't want them to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this entire thing's about.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So, see if I have anything else in here. Hey, there's an election coming up tomorrow, isn't there?
Yeah, just a little one. And by the way, you still have 4 minutes to fill, so, find something.
4 minutes to fill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think enough people, and I feel bad, I don't think I spent enough time asking enough people to ask enough questions of all these candidates in Manchester about what they think about this sort of thing. I mean, we had Ray Buckley come out and say that disaffected voters were white supremacists, and I don't think that got near enough play. I don't think enough candidates were pressured into either advocating or opposing that statement. Antifa hasn't been getting a lot of press. That doesn't mean they've been doing anything. It pretty much means that the press just isn't covering it, because every time they cover it, stormtroopers get a bad...
Right, just like they're not covering the now demonstrable connections between the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party and this, what's the name of the outfit who produced the dossier with help from the Russians?
Fusion GPS.
Fusion GPS, Bill Clinton's, big paydays, the $145 million that the Clinton Foundation received from Russian front companies around the time the Uranium One deal was being approved, thanks to Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State.
But Rich, they are covering Donna Brazille walking back her comments in her book about the meddling in the Democrat primary.
Yeah, well, wasn't this the same Donna Brazille who was fired from CNN after a release of emails? I forget if it was WikiLeaks or if it was James O'Keefe, who caught the media colluding with the Hillary campaign, all this stuff they were coordinating and working on together. And, wasn't this the same Donna Brazille who, was caught feeding questions that were going to be asked to Clinton in debates before they were asked? I forget if they were debates with Bernie or debates with Trump or both. But she's running around telling everybody how bad the Clinton campaign was and how the DNC fixed it for her to beat Bernie, and she was part of the crew that was helping to beat Bernie. Yep,
she was. She's got a lot of integrity, so you really don't know what the hell the heck she's saying. I mean, imagine if this was a Republican problem. You'd never hear the end of it, and that's kind of how it works. And as a media person, you understand that you need to do everything you can to try to get the other side out, to try to ask those questions, and to try to get people to ask politicians questions like, do you think Ray Buckley's right? Are New Hampshire voters white supremacists? Do you believe Antifa has a right to silence speech before it occurs? I think these are pretty important issues. Not everybody's going to be a constitutional scholar, but most people grasp what free speech is. They understand that you have a right to have a peaceful opinion about anything. And to suggest that anyone has the right to go out and intimidate you into silence is an absurd notion. I mean, I think most people would be offended by it, and I don't think we use it enough.
Listen, the biggest problem here in this country is not that there are people like this that exist, but that the opposition to those people doesn't push back. And that is why I maintain that Donald Trump will, when he runs for re-election, make Reagan's re-election landslide look small, because at the end of the day, he's exposing everybody for what they are, either a villain or a coward, because he is taking on fights that nobody has taken on in the Republican Party in anybody's memory. And they're policy fights, they're political fights. They're fights that Reagan would have taken on, albeit in a different way with a different tone. At the end of the day, I agree. As Limbaugh says, this is what pushback looks like, and I don't know. I'm just not getting the sense that Donald Trump is in trouble. In fact, the sense that I'm getting is he's about to open up a can of you-know-what on members of both parties in the 2018 election, and I suspect that the 2018 midterm elections are going to feature Donald Trump unleashed. Not just in states, but states and congressional districts where he is not happy with the incumbent, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and he's going to fight for the person he wants, whether it's in a Republican primary or in a general election.
Well, people need to go to American Spectator and look up Angela Codevilla's Ruling Class versus Country Class. It's 14 pages long. Reassociate yourself with it if you've read it before. If you've never read it, you should read it. It'll tell you a lot about why Donald Trump was elected president, and it'll inform you on the path going forward against the political class and the establishment. It's a great piece.
Steve MacDonald of NewMediaMilitia.com. As always, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.